thank you for joining us, for the 8 of you that are here. Appreciate you being here. So we're here to talk about how to share your success of a project with your sponsor. First, I wanted to introduce our team. Sasha Tkachev is with the CDE. She works on the CalPad system as a Scrum Master, and she is a certified PMP. When she's not dreaming of her next CalPads release, you'll find her teaching violin or playing electric violin. And she recently took up running on the path for a marathon, but so far we're shooting for a quarter of a marathon. And Wendell LeBon is a functional analyst with the ITS division at SDCOE. Wendell's busy with his 2 boys, and when he's had his fill, you'll find him racing around town in his modern classic Trans Am. And I'm John Leland, currently the CTO of Solana Beach School District. If you don't find me in my wood shop, making toys for my niece and nephews actually, you may find me in the San Diego area out on a mountain bike trail or lost on a motorcycle somewhere in Baja. So that's our team today. And so with that, we'll jump in here. So kind of the big question as we start looking at sharing with our sponsor is it time? Are we ready? How is it we get that castle door to open? When we look at your project land map, you see the sign off with your sponsor as the last stop before the castle. In the session, we're going to try to dig a little deeper and look at ways to make that meeting more of a success with your sponsor. So questions to think about as we kind of start today. When we look back at our project charter, we identified project objectives, success criteria. And so how would we answer some of these questions, or were we able to? Did we meet our objectives? Were there gaps or other items that were not complete? How will those items be addressed? In many projects, of course, there will be things that are not completed or not met. It's just a reality, so we need to plan to be able to explain why. Why are these objectives may still be relevant or not? And what is the plan to address them? And as we move through, how do we measure success? How do we share our success? Did we actually add value? We recently completed an implementation of a visitor management system. And during that process, we determined that the first 3 weeks of use, there were 300 volunteer applications submitted and 1,500 badges printed. Is that a good indicator of success? Or would it be better to use a metric that was more that this was achieved with only 10 support calls and we reduced the process for the application from 15 minutes to 5? So how can we look at that differently and share what we're looking for from the lens of a sponsor? And then what's left? Many times there are things left to do. What do we do with these? And so something just to keep in mind, one of the things that we as Solana Beach have found that's been great about the framework that SDCOE EPMO has provided us is that it really builds on itself. And what I mean by that is the framework helps give structure and compartmentalize the work. So the content that we create in each step really informs the next. So for instance, when you create your project charter, you end up with a list of milestones. Those milestones allow you to look at that timeline at a high level without getting lost in the minutia. And then you can use those when you're ready to build your project plan as a great starting point and build out those things and focus on that detail. And so this same kind of idea works with the sponsor sign-off as well. Pulling content from the project charter, the project plan, the status reports really helps to build that final report and lead to that sponsor sign-off. It may look like from the outset that the framework creates a lot of overhead, but we found in reality it really helps to build the content and keep things focused as we move through that process. All right, so then the next question is thinking about who's in your audience. Sometimes your sponsor may just be your sponsor. It could be multiple people. It could be your boss. It could be you. And depending on the project and how you want to share that with them, how can we anticipate what kind of questions the audience that you're talking to are going to have? And then same kind of idea, who should present? Is it just the project manager? Is the whole team? We recently had a project where we had each member of the project team share a different portion of the presentation and got really good feedback from everybody about that. And so that was one angle we took. Okay, so as we move forward, one of the big questions is how do we know when our project is done? So if you would, in the chat, if you can give us some thoughts. How do you know when it's time to close the door on this one and move on? Any thoughts on that? The sponsor signed off. Okay. We met our goals. Thank you to my team who is here. When the objectives have been met. Okay. Making sure that the support team can support. Change requests stop coming. That's a good one. I like that. All right, so then again, stop getting requests for change in the original scope. When service functions without constant intervention, that might never happen. Yeah, thank you, Risa. Okay, well, thank you for that input. So next up, we're gonna move to Sasha, and she's gonna talk about starting expectations.
Hey, hello everyone. Expectations. They're one of our favorite topics. How do we manage expectations? When we're working with sponsors, our team, we have to start with good relationships, right? Relationships help to manage and talk about expectations. And especially when we run into blockers or we run into situations where things aren't happening as predicted, sometimes there's layers and complexities to those things, and we need to be able to have those conversations. So coming into, I think I'll talk about the current CalPADS file submission redesign that we did at the Department of Education. Some of you might have exposure to that, and you might see that there's a lot of stuff that we're still fixing, and you can also see that there's a lot of communication happening. From the beginning with the team, we worked on, and I worked with getting into a ownership and leadership position myself. So as a Scrum Master, as the PM, it doesn't matter if your team is large or small, getting into a position of I am owning this project at, what's the boundary of my ownership? What's the boundary of ownership between me and my sponsor? Meaning, what do I have decision-making capacity around? What does the sponsor have decision-making capacity around? What does the team have decision-making capacity around? So that folks know their roles and responsibilities, and they know what level of ownership to take, so that you're not playing blame games, or you're working out who needs to do what to make things move quickly if needed, right? If you need to crash something or move something quickly. Also, one of the things that we set up in that particular project was shared systems. So we have multiple and layered systems. But primarily we use DevOps and set up a project wiki, so that as we were moving through different models and processes that were changing or updates, we could update the wiki and have a shared space. And not only that, I had some internal shared systems with project sponsor and stakeholders, so that folks could stay up to date on a daily basis as that was moving. And then another thing I want to talk about with leadership is method. I wrote this down: method plus consistency equals trust. So relationships are all about trust. Being able to talk about expectations is that, if I promise something's going to happen, or if the team is shooting for a target, that they're able to achieve those targets, and they're able to consistently show and produce results in a way that both stakeholders and sponsors can develop a relationship of trust. Because as you move through the project, when you hit those blockers, you want to be able to negotiate and move efficiently and agilely through that process. So sometimes that starts with, setting up a few meetings at the beginning. Sometimes it starts with producing reports that are consistent and reliable. Sometimes it's, getting information that's not necessarily documented information, but setting up, quick 15-minute calls saying, hey, I've heard XYZ from so-and-so. Hey, sponsor, can we have a quick one-on-one so that we can work out this one issue? Because it's not something we can do in a formal setting, or it's something we need to do really quickly. So building that consistency is really important. That's one of the reasons why I put the quote here: you do not rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. So there's a couple points in the projects that I've worked in recently, especially with CalPADS redesign, where we had layered internal systems between organizations, where Security was a blocker. Folks, their identities and how they were getting in and out of systems and access to different information, they were blocked or changed, or there were updates to the different software we were using. So we had to move within the systems we were using to make sure everybody still had access. That's one example. The next piece that I want to talk about is, who is your sponsor? So if you're going to build a relationship with somebody, and I'm focusing in on the sponsor, not primarily the team, because when we come to closeout, we need to be able to have that pre-meeting with the sponsor that says, didn't we meet the minimum requirements for what we're doing for this project? Let's have a really honest and open and clean conversation about what we're bringing to the team and what the team is, anxious about, what we're celebrating, what all those different things are. So by this point in time, at a closeout, you should have like a new best friend, right? You should know their communication style, how often they want to communicate, what type of communication is good, and how to deal with importance of information. And if it's urgent, a lot of times people get importancy and urgent confused, right? They go, well, this is really important, but is it a fire that we're fighting, right? And how to balance that communication and what is it? Because if the sponsor's getting urgency 24/7, how can they identify, what is the most important part of the decision making they need to do, or possibly something they need to bring to a board, or possibly they need to talk to external stakeholders about? If everything's a firefight, then how do we differentiate between that noise? Implicit and explicit expectations. So I know that people have explicit expectations, the things that are stated, but a lot of times, especially when I'm consulting with a sponsor, I think about what was explicitly stated. And then after the meeting, I try to schedule some time for like 15 minutes and think about what wasn't talked about, right? And then figure out how to kind of tease that out and glean that out, and how to ask those questions at the next meeting, or how to do a follow-up on the things that maybe were assumed, or the things that people are hoping will happen, so that you can get measurable and executable instances around those things, so that you can actually perform to those things. So that process of interviewing and working with that sponsor is really important to the scope and the objectives of the team. And that leads us right into no surprises, right? So if I know as a PM, or as the Scrum Master, or whatever role I'm working with, where I'm coordinating this information, right? So the reason I'm not talking about this only as a PM, and I'm bringing up Scrum Masters, because we've got a lot of folks that maybe work IT projects, or they're working a model where they're not necessarily having purview to the entire roadmap or the entire schedule of what's going on, but they're doing a lot of coordination with sponsors and stakeholders, and they're doing a lot of operational coordination with work teams. So being able to demo projects frequently and get that feedback, being able to build out what's the expectation at closeout through that frequent discussion, and some of the other things we just stated. And then one of the things that I wanted to be sure to put in here, and I stated before, was planning the meeting before the meeting, right? So making sure that, and I put the quote in here, embrace the suck, because it's a military term, but the idea is like, we want to embrace the things that are hairy. We want to really put our arms around those things and get the buy-in around what those things are, and sometimes lead with those things. A lot of times people lead with celebrations, right? Well, sometimes we want to lead with the things that maybe need to open the air in conversation so we can celebrate, right? Sometimes teams want to see, okay, we got 60% of this, but we ran into this big blocker that has nothing to do with us, but how are we handling that? And when we go into a closeout discussion, whether it's an in-person meeting, or it's some other sort of coordinated event or process that you guys do for closeout, you may need to get specific feedback around the things that maybe weren't fully completed. And that is incredibly important, not to get everybody just to sign off and go, yes, 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 yes. Okay, good, good, good. Celebrate. Yeah, 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 yeah. But to go, hey, we've got, this piece over here that hasn't been supported or hasn't been resolved. And then how are we going to take that out and work on that? And doing that with the team or with the stakeholder, and having space to do that, and getting that honest feedback I personally think is really important. Okay. And the last slide I think I have here is capturing the moment. So when we're talking about getting all of that feedback from our team and from our sponsor and stakeholders, or a partnership or partners in or business partners, we want to be able to record and capture what that approval is, right? And approval might look different to other people, to different people, depending on how they speak and how some people do it in a formal way and some people do it in a less formal way. So we have to capture that information and then maybe present it in a way back to our stakeholders and sponsors that is more formal, so we know that we have a sign off. But maybe in that meeting where we're getting feedback from everybody, it takes form in the form of like a brainstorm session, or possibly we go through different bullet points or different features, or different results of maybe a service that was changed, and we get that feedback and then quantify it for people. So we definitely want to facilitate and guide not only that process in, let's say, a closeout meeting, but also the process in the documentation, so that we follow through the feedback that we're getting, not just the items that we've projected that are the things that we want to close out, or the goals or the objectives that we have wanted to get to. So I think with that, we're going to move forward to Wendell, and he's going to talk more about documentation and creative ways of working with capturing those items.
All right, perfect. Thank you, Sasha, and good morning, everyone. I see that I'm not able to take control of the presentation, so I'm going to go ahead and apply a risk mitigation technique for this, especially in the live environment, and ask my colleague John to take control of the presentation so that he can guide me through the different slides. So you should be seeing that first slide, final presentation documentation. And I wanted to continue our conversation today by providing and supplying some actual practical examples of how to report out your project successes to your sponsor. And so, of course, in any different project, there's like a ton of different ways to do that, right? And so what I wanted to do is actually focus on the first document. John, if you would mind moving on to our lessons learned worksheets. And so one of the ways that I, specifically in my projects, that I, report out the successes of the project is through the first type is a lessons learned worksheet, and I'm sure we've heard a ton about lessons learned worksheets throughout the conference already. But this is a really great way to kind of extract some of the successes in your project. And so here, the lessons learned worksheet that I sent out is a very basic Word document that had 3 questions that I would send out to my internal partners. And so the questions are like, what worked well? What did we use a new process that worked well? Did we use the new tools during the project that worked well? So these are some of the things that your internal partners could put on the lessons learned documents. Where can we improve, right? Because we all know that in every project there's something that's always that we can always improve on, right? There's no project that goes off without a hitch that's perfect. So it's a great way to kind of see where we can improve for the next time. And then finally, the last question is, what are you most proud of? So this question gives the opportunity for your team members to kind of put out what they're proud of. Is it something that they specifically succeeded in doing? That's something that they can put on the lessons learned worksheet as well. Okay, so from that, let's go ahead and go to the next slide, John. So what you're seeing here is an actual lessons learned worksheet that I've used in one of my projects. And so in the project that I was leading, we utilize like certain different teams within the project. So you got your support teams, you got your database teams, and each team was comprised of many different team members. And so with this, I didn't want to just hand out or send out the lessons learned worksheet to like 20 individuals, 30 individuals, and get 30 of them back. So what I did was I actually sent out the lessons learned worksheet to the lead of that particular team. And so I invited the lead of that team to have their own kind of lessons learned discussion amongst themselves and create and compile their own lessons learned worksheet to submit to me. So instead of getting like 20 or 30 different worksheets, I would get back 3 or 4 worksheets, which then I can, make it easier to kind of review, compile, and put together in kind of like a one master lessons learned worksheets here. So just some of the things that worked well was the project kickoff meeting went well, kind of defining who the stakeholders were, their roles and responsibilities. We had a thing called office hours. So at the end of the project, we made the project team, any type of vendors that were involved, available to all the districts, charter schools that were involved in the project, so that they could come in, ask questions, and they would get their questions answers directly from the subject matter experts. So those are some of the things that work well. Collaboration between the different teams worked well. Things that can be improved, expectations. So again, and kind of setting up the expectations, the visions of the project. We could have done a better job doing. Training could have been better, expanding product knowledge, things like that. So those things that you can take away from the lessons learned worksheets. Okay, so moving on to the next slide here. From here, again, there's a ton of different ways to make to report out your successes, documentation being one of them. So how can we make these documentations a lot more fun than just creating paperwork and kind of just sending it out to your sponsor? Okay, so different examples, recording your closeout meeting. So instead of just getting everybody in a virtual room or a physical room, maybe recording the meeting so that you can have that as a historical artifacts. Videos, interactions, shared documentations. If you have a SharePoint site, you can do that as well. So at this point, what we'd like to do is go down to a Padlet. You have the URL right here. Feel free to click that link. We can also send you to a Padlet and maybe jot down some of the things that, some ideas that you have to make documentation fun. Let's go ahead and do that for a few minutes.
I think we'll leave the screen up rather than show the Padlet because I will not be able to reshare the presentation. Okay. So we can read from it if everybody hops on there.
Food, got it. Get someone else to do it. That's pretty funny. Turn on some music and make specific time to document after the meeting. That's perfect. Record the meeting and put in bookmarks where you have key points to review. Perfect examples. Thank you, everyone.
Food.
Using things like Padlet. Set aside time during the day to document. By not doing it for years and finding out how bad that is. Okay. All great stuff. GIFs, love that. That's perfect. All right, let's go ahead and spend just one more minute or so if nobody else has any ideas. I like this one, thank you notes. We made custom project thank you notes and encouraged team members to send them out to other team members, sharing acknowledgement and gratitude. That's perfect. I love that. I love that idea. All right, well, thank you everyone for sharing your ideas. Here, we have another one, documenting the meeting. Use crowd sharing software to record ideas. Get everyone to contribute a point. Perfect. All right. Well, thank you again for everyone who shared their ideas on the Padlet. John, would you go ahead and move us over to the next slide? Okay, so in addition to the lessons learned worksheets, one of the documents that I've used in the past is a project survey using the online app called MS Form. Now, this is instead of just a Word document or something that I can share through email. This is more of a electronic survey that you could send to your partners as well. This particular one was for my external partners in the project. And so using Microsoft Forms, you can create different questions in different type of formats. So you can ask questions with a yes or no answer, questions that say rate, rate your experience in training from like 1 through 5. Choose all the answers that apply. So you have great control in terms of how you can set up the questions and what kind of responses you wish the user or the participant to supply to you. And so once they get through all the questions, they simply click the submit button at the bottom, and instantaneously you get the results of their survey. So great way of kind of extracting some of the things that may have worked and success and are being successful in your projects. All right, John, next slide, please. And so what was the point of filling out the lessons learned worksheet and the project survey? So these are all inputs to what we call the final presentation using MS PowerPoint. So I'm sure Perry and Risa kind of recognize this slide right here. It's taken directly from the EPMO project management tools here. So this is the PowerPoint that I use to kind of create a final presentation for my sponsor and kind of incorporating what we learned and the successes that we've accomplished from the lessons learned worksheet and the project survey into this kind of final presentation. All right, so next slide, John. So here, just kind of a screenshot of the final presentation I created for the PBCS Wave 2 implementation project that I led. And just a quick overview. This is kind of like a second round of implementing a cloud-based accounting, budgeting, and forecasting system for districts. Next slide, John. All right, so within the final presentation, some of the things that was included in there was who was involved, so this is a way of kind of giving credit to your project team. These are the folks that made, the project successful to you. So it's an opportunity to show the project sponsor, these are, the resources that worked hard to get this project done and successfully completed. You also want to add the objectives and success criteria. So again, kind of bringing up what the objectives of the project was. And so for this project here, we had 4 different objectives. And, we went back and said, okay, well, based on these objectives, the team did well to either successfully, meet these objectives and tell and show your sponsor, how the team did. Also different ways to kind of tie in goals. So here at SDCOE, we have different board goals as well as ITS goals. So it's a great way of kind of tying in what this project, how the project kind of ties into the different goals that you have within your organization. All right, and going into the next slide, John. And then finally, again, kind of just working in what we learned from the lessons learned worksheet, what worked well. So we listed down some of the things here and where we can improve. So taking the lessons from the mistakes or things that didn't work as good as well within this project, and kind of just learning from those and taking it over to your next project. So that was like one of so in summation, that's this is the final presentation that I sent out to my sponsor to kind of tell her how the project went for this particular project. So from there, let me go ahead and hand it over to John to explore several other options you can do to kind of report the successes of your project.
All right, so moving up, how can we spice it up? How can we make sharing with our sponsor a little more fun, a little more exciting? How do we get that sponsor to their positive, happy place? So first up is don't always do the same thing. Look for other ways to present things. and I shared earlier an example of using different presenters. So how can the members of the team participate and get their voice in there? We talked a little bit about doing video. So is there potential for a live demo? Instead of a slide deck and a talking head, what if you did a live demo conducted by somebody who used the system? They can help give that their voice and impact. Other options are potentially recording a testimonial about how the system made their lives better. You know, I work at a school district, and so we are always looking for ways to include students and allow them to share their voice. And as we all know, how you can always count on students to come up with something unexpected and an entertaining perspective. Is there an alternate venue you can use? So say we had a project that didn't go so well. I might want to use an outdoor amphitheater that just happens to be next to a student garden. How can anyone be upset when they're distracted by first graders harvesting Brussels sprouts instead of listening to how things went? Be creative. You know, look for those things that are different. I did see in the Padlet too that just popped up just as we were exiting, somebody put in collaboration. So it really is about including the team and ways to help support them. All right, so if we could in the chat, what are some other ideas? Other ways you can include the team, other ways to spice it up. Going outside, I like it. Having a team member present a special contribution they made. A walkthrough of a physical change. Like going to a computer lab, so going on site and actually seeing what's going on. Any other ways to spice up your life? Bringing those testimonials to a meeting. Using awesome quotes like we've seen on several slides today. Okay, well, thank you for that. Doing shout outs. Keeping your videos short so it's not overdone. All right, well, thank you for that input. We'll jump to the next slide, which is Sasha.
Okay, so as you guys probably have figured out, I deal in IT project management and tech and data software, things like that. So I like numbers. They're my friends, right? Because when people say, this was a big impact, right? It's really helpful to get quantity, like quantify impact. It's helpful to get size relationships of impact, right? It's helpful so that how we feel about it can maybe be, in those expectations things we're talking about, how we feel about it can be like measured with, you know, what are the facts, right? We want to see, you know, does the data that we've gathered, and we want to make sure we're gathering the right data, right? We want to make sure we're focused on the right impact. So just starting to ask those questions, like even to say, well, what things do we want to know about the thing that we're doing? How do we quantify the impact? It helps us to focus in on how do we measure the actual success of the project. So when you get to that closeout, you can say, hey, we've asked this thing along the way. We have these visualizations that we've got, you know, pictures and snapshots of what happened along the way, so that we're not just talking about it or hearing things from, let's say, the field, or from our, let's say, our users or our clients or whoever the folks are that we're serving, or just, you know, stakeholders, or let's say political opinions. Sometimes we have that going on, but we can quantify. We can say, you know, hey, 3 out of 20 schools were affected, right? Versus 20 out of 20 schools were affected, and present that in ways to promote positive conversation around numbers and the impact there. So we've got a what's left. What's left after the end of our presentation and we've gotten the opportunity to talk to our sponsor and we've documented everything, what do we do next? So I think this is going to go back to John, yeah? Or is this me? This is me still.
Nope.
Sorry.
Oh, it's actually me. I was muted.
Yeah.
So the reality is have the meeting, right? We've gotten prepared. We know who our sponsor is. We made sure the meeting is going to be a success before we show up in the room. And now what do we do, right? So we remember to engage our partners. We talked a little bit about identifying opportunities that may have been created by the product. So for instance, somebody shared going to the site. So if we have, in our case, I shared the visitor management system, is actually taking your sponsor to the site and actually physically having the meeting there and seeing the system live. How can we do to support that? And really, we're here. We did it. And so then we'll jump to a little feedback. And this one's you, Sasha.
Thanks. We've done this a couple times, but there's been a lot going on. So what do I do when I get feedback? So we've talked in generalities a lot in this session, and I just want to be clear. What we do is we pull documentation, we get clarity about what our final objectives or goals are, whether we do a minimum viable product or we have a set of goals and objectives and we've had a specific scope that we've honed in on, but we get documentation ready, we meet with our sponsor, and then we have a team or a stakeholder or a business partner, whatever version of that is best for your particular project and your particular group. You have that closeout meeting, and then you have follow-up to that meeting. And so in that meeting, what do you do with feedback, right? Is it just a presentation where people are following along with a PowerPoint and they just go, yes, 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 check the boxes, we're done? Or is it a meeting where you go, okay, we want to identify what's the scope that's been met? What are enhancements that we've discovered? Is there things that need more detail? Do we discover things that were features that now need to be added to something that's already operational? Now that we actually have it operational, it's working, but there's additional features we'll add. We need to be able to pull in that feedback. And then after all those things are completed, we've got the closeout, we know that we're done. We need to have a methodology or a process so that we can assess whether or not we have operational work or we have project work, right? Or we have, I don't even know what it is, work, right? There needs to be a method and a process and a way to move from, hey, we finished this and so has an idea, right? And it doesn't just get lumped into, oh, we're just continually finishing this project work, right? We want to close that completely. And we want to say, okay, here's the boundaries of the new thing that we're doing. Whose responsibility is it? If this is operational work that needs to go along with the thing that has been implemented, that needs to go to the operational folks and they can implement that, right? And if we're wearing many hats at once, it's really important to be able to differentiate what these different things are, because we can get overclocked, wearing a bunch of different hats at once, right? So we need to be able to present to our sponsors, hey, this is something that happens during operational time, and this is something that's new. And then we can manage, hey, I have, maybe there's a parking lot of ideas. And then it depends on your sponsor and your business partners are, right? So sometimes they come up with tons of ideas and they never get implemented, right? There's just a lot of good ideas. But sometimes you have folks that want to keep track of everything, and then you want to stay current, right? So you can put it in your bucket of, hey, we've had these ideas for the last 5 years and we haven't been able to do, maybe 5 or 6 of them, right? But maybe it's a good opportunity to factor in how are we cleaning out and how are we cycling through the larger program or the larger portfolio at hand. It's a great opportunity to bring that up, because a lot of times people are really in what's happening today, and it's a little harder to strategize in that larger piece. So building in that process and strategy of what is operational and what isn't is really helpful to getting being able to create new momentum, right? Because we have to get new inspiration and new momentum for something that is coming next. If we're just working on the same old thing all the time, or if that operational thing, it keeps having that block and we can't move past it all the time, that becomes something that is difficult to work with, right? And so this is one of those open moments where people are open and they're thinking about it, and they're happy because they finished something. There's something to celebrate. It's a great opportunity to reassess. So that was a lot, but I just wanted to put it all out there. So let's move on to the next one.
All right, so you've made it to the end of the project. It's done. Your tasks are, checked off. Your closing documents are all written, reviewed, and put away for forever. Let's come to it's party time. So in the chat, for the last few minutes, can go ahead and put in your favorite way to celebrate with your team, and how would you support your sponsor in this celebration? So go ahead and put in the chat how you would do that.
We have a fun little something for you.
And just to add to that, I think in many of the meetings we've talked about how to celebrate with your team. And so how could we dig a little deeper on this, and how could we support our sponsor in giving them information that they could use in a celebration? So whether that's a list of the team with one thing that each of them accomplished, those kind of ideas. How could we go a little deeper on celebrating and supporting the sponsor? So far, we're focused on food.
Yeah.
Trip to Hawaii, pizza, love it.
Enchiladas, burritos, pizza, ice cream. Seems like food is the answer. Huh? Disneyland. I don't know what company you guys work for.
Oh, one thing we didn't talk about celebrating people, you can nominate people for awards. So sometimes in the community, there's award nominations, or there's professional nominations, or certifications, or things that are, you find out about people, or you can research, and you can, nominate them for their work on XYZ. You know what I mean?
Little write-ups. Good write-ups, though. That makes a little more sense. Guess it could go the other way if the project really went south. Promote their boss, the good work done. All right. And that's for a gas card. That might be a good idea nowadays, huh? All right. Well, thank you, everybody. So with that, we are at the end of the presentation. So if there's any other questions or thoughts that you want to put in the chat, we'll try to get them in. I guess we went over a minute already. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
All right, there's lunchtime now, so everybody's gonna go jump on that.
Yeah, lunchtime. That's the one thing I miss about being in person at conferences, is the opportunity to chat in person at lunch and those hours.
Speaking of, we do have 3 lunchrooms available to folks if they want to keep the conversations going during lunch. We have lunchroom 1, which is going to be Ask the EPMO. So if you have any questions for us, lunchroom 2 is going to be Talk to a Vendor. Our reps from Monday.com will be in there. And then lunchroom 3 is Talk to a Vendor Infotech. So if you'd like to talk to anyone from Infotech, they will be in lunchroom 3. So if you're feeling lonely, Sasha, hop into a lunchroom.
I'll just do a quick plug too. If you're feeling lonely, game hour is a good chance, because you'll get a chance to meet someone else there too. And that's at 2:00. And I just sent an email out that has a sneak peek. So if you want all the questions in advance for one of the games, check out the email I sent, because you can look at all the questions so you're ready to go to put all the answers in. It relieves all that anxiety that you might have. And you'll see, you're going to know a lot of the answers to the questions.
All right.
All right.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks,
Thanks,
everybody.
everybody. Nice
Thank
job.
you very much.
John, Sasha, and Wendell. Great job.
Thank
Thank
you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Have fun, everybody. Bye.